Please help me give Asmita a warm welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Asmita Kanolkar. I'm the Senior Director at SMC. I have about 24 years of experience in medical devices and pharmaceutical services. And today I will be talking about new mindset for combination product. So first of all, I wanted to start off with a big thank you for everyone to be here. And it's really nice to be here at the Biomed Show. The pharma industry in the past 1.5 years has seen some challenging times. And the new normal of the pharma industry is very different as we know it today from what it was before. So let's try to look at some of this new outlook of the pharma industry. We're looking at very rapid development of some of these therapies and new treatments that are coming to life. What we thought would be years to come to market, we're looking at months for these therapies to be developed very fast. And there are regulatory pathways that support this. What we thought before about traditional clinical trials in a hospital setting has now changed. We're looking at clinical trials even for complicated therapies like cancer therapies that are being conducted at home now, which is a dramatic change from what we knew of the pharma industry. Finally, we're looking at some of this personalized care where we have all of this data generated about the disease, about the patient, and looking towards targeted therapies. Whether it is looking at very specific disease for the patient, the specific area, looking at the specific disease not only down to the patient, but down to the cell, the gene, the molecule. And when we start to look at these complicated drugs and therapies, we are now looking at something that's not really out there, but actually now in the hands of the patients. And they're pushing the limits of where the current device technology is. And so now we are looking at complex formulations that need to be delivered and need to figure out a way of delivering it. So as we start to balance this sort of fast, rapid growth and rapid sort of getting these therapies to the market, we also have to balance the risk of the unknowns and the uncertainties. So we have to look at some new mindsets for combination product development. And so today, Ali and I are going to be talking about some of these new mindsets and how they fit in with moving forward towards a forward-looking thought process for developing combination devices. All right, so before I get started, I just wanted to do a brief introduction to my company, SMC Group of Companies. We comprise of 3 entities under one umbrella. SMC Limited is a global manufacturer of finished devices with 33 years of experience. We are in medical devices for drug delivery, for auto injectors, wearables, inhalers, syringes. Oval Medical Technologies is our specializes in development of auto-injectors, both for intramuscular as well as subcutaneous deliveries. We have our own IP on some of these auto-injector platforms. And then finally, Cambridge Pharma is our pharmaceutical services division with upcoming fill finish capabilities for both clinical and commercial batches. So let's start with what really the COVID-19 impact was on the drug development cycle. This is very important to understand because as we look at some of these areas for drug development, it really ties in for what we need for combination device. So starting off with the drug discovery segment that goes from really coming up with new targets all the way to preclinical studies, followed by clinical evaluation through some of the approvals, and then finally manufacturing and launch. So the drug discovery segment really saw rapid evaluation of a lot of new therapies, and urgency was really the name in town. So when we start to look at some of the urgency, it was not only just for infectious diseases, but it was also the amplification of some of this struggles that came for chronic as well as crisis diseases from the pandemic. And typically when we look at urgency and bringing the therapies faster to the clinic, the pharma companies are looking at intravenous delivery or IV as sort of the route of administration. But with the pandemic, what happened was we had to look at other methods where patients could not go to the hospitals. So subcutaneous delivery started to come into a bigger picture, as well as long-acting injectables, where we're trying to minimize the time of injection as well as increasing the time between the therapies. If we looked at clinical evaluation, really that was the biggest impact on from COVID, where we saw really trial delays, recruitment difficulty, loss of patients. And I don't think any of the experts would have imagined that the clinical trials today would be held at home, especially for very complicated therapies like cancer treatments. We were conducting clinical trials at home. And then finally, manufacturing and launch, we saw rapid capacity development. We needed to use single-use technology, automation. We saw shortage of labor, shortage of supply. We all know about the glass shortages. And so we had to look at other avenues of how to make up the scale for manufacturing. With all of this, I present to you the new mindset for combination product. So there are three real items on this one. First, the rapid development. So as we start to see the rapid development of these therapies from years to months, we have to develop the drug and the device simultaneously, especially for the novel therapies, because there are a lot of unknowns and there are a lot of uncertainties. There is new routes of administration now. There is larger volumes being delivered, and we don't know what the patient tolerability is. So when we start to look at bringing these therapies at a fast pace, we need to combine sort of the drug and the device development early on. The second mind shift for decentralized care, a lot of the healthcare professionals had to do outreach activities now to go to the patients to be able to deliver some of these therapies. And the delivery optimization also ties in with the clinical outcome. So now we had to look at streamlining devices. In addition, a lot of the pharma companies now started to look at self-administration of these therapies as an avenue to move forward. And that is also a mindset change of how we develop combination product. And finally, moving from standard to custom, this really entails adaptive manufacturing. And we'll talk a little bit more about adaptive manufacturing, about customizing the processes, but also trying to manage the iterations, because there's no perfect device as such that fits in very well with the new formulations that are coming. And so there is an optimization cycle both on the drug side and the device side, and we need to be able to have these fast adaptive cycles and iterations to be able to move forward. So if we were to take some lessons away from the mindset change, we really need an enabling design, first of all, to be able to handle some challenging formulations. Second, we need to focus on patient-centricity, because now the word is self-administration, self-service, and with patients delivering it, we need to focus on some of the design elements related to the patient interfaces. And then finally, integrated development of both the drug and the device through adaptive manufacturing. So I'm going to focus on two novel therapies, which are for long-acting injectables and targeted biotherapeutics, as sort of an example for what we need for enabling design and move forward. But this slide here talks about, on the left side, some of the drug novel therapies and concepts that are coming through, the long-acting injectables, the oligonucleotide therapeutics. Then we have the targeted biotherapeutics and cell gene therapy. And then on the right side are the trends for the delivery side of things, of what we are looking to kind of combine the two. So when we look at long-acting injectables are something that are slow release or controlled release over time. So you're looking at a therapy that stays in for say a month or 2 months or 3 months, and there's a controlled release of the drug over time. When we start to formulate long-acting injectables, they are typically formulated in some sort of vehicles like oil solutions or water-insoluble suspensions, crystalline polymeric barriers. Those vehicles are needed to adjust, sort of decrease the solubility for long-acting injectables. When we look at these vehicles, though, they are high viscosity. And so these drugs that now are coming out for long-acting injectables can be 1,000 centipoise or even up to 10,000 centipoise. So we're looking at a very different formulation that we need to deliver for long-acting injectables. And this is pushing the limits of current delivery technologies or devices that cannot withstand such high pressures required for long-acting injectables. Another thing about long-acting injectables is about when you release this drug, it's very much related to what is the shape and the size of the bolus. And the shape and the size of the bolus is affected by the injection speed. So now you can see how the injection parameters are tied to the bolus optimization, the delivery optimization, and subsequent PK optimization for the drug. And once we get through that, we can now also see that there are going to be integrated cycles for optimizing this release of long-acting injectables. When we talk about biotherapeutics, these are substantially large molecules. So probably about 200 to 1,000 times bigger than normal small molecule or chemical drugs that we know of. And when we're delivering these biologics or biotherapeutics, it's not just the size of the molecule that's larger, and they're usually in larger dose as well. So there's large levels of the dose that needs to be injected. And these molecules are also fragile. They can be affected, degraded by oxidation, by any impurities, by lubricants, by peroxides. So now there's the container compatibility that also comes into play. And then finally, some of the patients have experienced, because of injection time variability, wet injections. And when it comes to biologics, that can cause an immunological response. So now we have to also be careful with the drug delivery where we cannot have wet injections. And also, again, optimizing these biologics are over bioavailability between animal testing and human testing also requires a lot of iterations. Beyond the delivery portion of the complexity of these drugs, there's also a patient-centricity point that we were talking about previously about self-administration. So not only are we now thinking about the safety outcome, adherence, and experience, it's also sort of the overall emotions and isolation from the pandemic that we have to consider. And some of the bullet points I want to leave today for everyone is that one size does not fit all is a message that we really need to take moving forward. Second is the patient interface focus, and we need to really look at how the design is affected by that. And then finally, really that message that it's not only the drug formulation, but it's also the delivery, and the two together need to be optimized for the optimized clinical outputs that we need for any therapeutic. So with that, let's start to move for what does the device architecture need to look like to have an enabling design that we can change internally and externally to adapt for the complex formulations, but also externally for the patient interface focus. And one of the key features is looking at a modular design where we look at the power pack, primary pack, and the patient interface as three different sort of cars in this modular design that can be changed without affecting each other and can be individually optimized and customized for each of those features. So I present to you our ArcBios platform that Oval has developed. And here you'll see that this platform, this technology can deliver drugs from anywhere from 1 ml to 10 ml, and with viscosities up to 10,000 centipoise. So the key feature to take away from here, if you looked at some of the performance setting, This could deliver a 1 ml 1000 centipoise drug formulation under 5 seconds with a 25 gauge needle. And the key thing here to remember is that with ArcBios, you're looking at an enabling technology for delivering not only the complex formulations, but then we are also looking at the patient interfaces and how that can be optimized. And that starts off by decoupling the patient triggering injection from the power pack. So when the cap is removed for the auto injector, the drug is pressurized, but the patient really does not feel the spring release. And so we can pressurize up to 300 bar in the container without the patient feeling the, this sort of spring release in the device. And then the patient interface that triggers the injection is when the sensor, skin sensor, comes in contact with the patient and the delivery happens, is triggered by the patient, but through a valve. And the valve is a very quiet valve, so that even when you are administering drugs that are high viscosity, large volume, you're actually taking into account the patient interface in this situation. Further on, I want to talk a little bit about the technology features of the primary drug container. So here we have a cup seal foil technology which can withstand high pressure up to 300 centipoise, which is about 4,000 psi. And that is needed for any drugs that would be high viscosity, large volumes. These containers can withstand that pressure. And then we have this release valve mechanism, which is a quiet and slow injection for at low activation forces. So now we're talking about patient benefits, not only from when we pressurize the drug, but also when it's released, it's done in a very quiet fashion. And then the primary drug container does not have any silicone lubrication, does not have any tungsten stake needle. So now what we have is a pretty clean system, which can also protect all of the biologics that I talked about, could potentially have an issue with any interaction of any sort of impurities. From the self-administration sequence perspective, this has now become, auto-injectors are generally very simple anyways, but now this is simplification for a very complex drug formulation delivery, and that's tied together with a simple removal of the cap as the first step, followed by pressing the device to the skin. That activates the injection. You hear the first click when it starts, second click when it's done, and you can remove and dispose it. When we start to talk about patient touch points, it's not only just about how the device sequence works, but it's also about how it appears. And when we start to think about the self-administration portion related to the emotions of the patient, now we are looking at so many different characteristics that we could look at for designing. Also, we talked about one size does not fit all. All patients are not the same. And so when we start to look at the dexterity differences from patients, and if we have to look at what is the downforce that's required and how is it friendly or not friendly for different population types of patients, we can look at all of these features that we can optimize externally to make this an optimal delivery for self-administration. Thinking more about along these lines, it's also important not only to look at how easy it is to deliver, but it's also that we do not have any user errors. So most of the user errors come from really the patient understanding whether they received the delivery or not, whether it started correctly, ended correctly. And so some of the features we have talked about are 360-degree viewing window. So no matter how the patient holds it, they can still see the drug being delivered. And there is a yellow, very distinct color indication when it starts to deliver, when it stops. And then on top of it, there is a start click and a stop click. So now you see how we are looking at the patient centricity at this level where we are looking at user error-free devices to make sure that it's administered correctly and the therapy will work. From there on, let's look at what does integrated early stage to launch means. We talked about adaptive manufacturing, and traditionally, The drug was developed, and then sort of the device tried to be customized or makeshift for the drug that was delivered. But with these complex novel therapies, this is not the case. And what we need to do is look at the drug and device together right from early characterization work to see how we can optimize the two. Especially important for the two groups of therapies that I was talking about, which was the long-acting injectables, where we need to optimize the slow release of the drug over time, and then also for the biologics, where we need to figure out the bioavailability from animal studies as we scale up to humans, and there are iterations back and forth, and these multiple iterations need to happen all the way through GMP cycles to really truly understand where we are headed with the optimization work. One of the ways to do this is injection characterization and predictive modeling. And what this does is that when you have a new formulation, we have a system which can add to injection formulation characterization. So on the left side, you see we have a force sensor, a displacement sensor, and a pressure sensor. And as the drug goes through the reservoir, we can model all of these three different parameters and then create a numerical model which can be further optimized. Now, when we start to look at some of these complex formulations like long-acting injectables, they are not Newtonian formulations. So non-Newtonian formulations are formulations where the viscosity changes with shear. And so when you start to think about, for example, shear thinning, some of these formulations can have a drastic change while you're delivering this dose. And the environmental parameters can have a huge impact on how the delivery injection time is changing and the range of time. So these numerical modeling can help really understand. We can throw in different types of inputs, thousands of variations for auto-injector optimization, and be able to really come up with the right choice and the right path of the device so we optimize each of these features. Another thing that I would like to throw in here is some of these long-acting injectables are two-phase systems. So they could be suspensions where you have a particle in a liquid phase, or you could have two liquid phases with two different viscosities. And when you're trying to deliver complex formulations like this sort of characterization becomes really important to understand exactly how you want to optimize the delivery. And again, bringing the point back that the delivery optimization is necessary for what the clinical outcome is of the dose of the therapy. Another way to look at some of this characterization, we talked about the importance of physiology, that one size doesn't fit all. When you look at different patients, the physiology is different for each patient. So the tissue make, the skin make, and how the drug flows through the skin is different through the tissue for each one. So what we have come up with is an ultrasound way of actually putting the drug through the skin and actually watching how the drug is absorbed by the tissue. So I can ask you to show the video here. We have a video. And you can see through the ultrasound that we can actually look at how the drug is dispersed within the tissue. This is also a very important characterization work that we need to understand upfront before we figure out what that delivery speed needs to be for the drug to be delivered under the skin. Finally, the ultrasound is sort of a 2D method of looking at how the drug flows. To look at it from a three-dimensional perspective, MRIs are a great way of doing it. And here we've shown some bolus images. Remember I talked about the bolus image, bolus size and shape being very important for how the drug dissipates. And that depends on the slow release for the long-acting injectable. If the surface area is round and small, like shown on the first picture, then there is the slow release of the drug. But if your injection speed is fast and high, and you have jetting, as shown in the bottom picture, what you have now is that there's a larger surface area. So as the API is released much faster. So it's sort of defeating the purpose of the long-acting injectable. And so that is very important to understand the bolus shape and the bolus size to be able to optimize as well for some of these characterization studies. And then finally, doing in vivo studies with an auto-injector simulator to actually figure out what are the variables that we see so we can optimize and make it consistent for these delivery and bolus sizes, so that then we also know that we have repeatable, optimal delivery and repeatable outcome of the clinical therapy. Finally, I come to the adaptive manufacturing. And as we all know, that it's not just about how we move the drug and the device forward, but through these iteration cycles, we need to take it through all of the GMP manufacturing. And that starts off not only with just the molding side of things, but it's also the fill finish, because with these complicated formulations, the filling is also filling is also challenging. They can be high viscosity filling, so you need different kinds of pumps, different kinds of heads, and then also some of the packaging, whether it's going to be sterilized, how do you develop all of these processes? And all of these steps also affect the final product. So as you go through these iteration cycles for the drug and the device, you need to have some sort of small batch manufacturing or adaptive manufacturing capabilities with single-use change-arounds, so you can actually tweak both the drug and the device and be able to move forward to an optimized delivery for these complex formulations. So in summary, I just want to leave everybody with these three thoughts, and I hope we've presented today through this presentation the new mindset for combination product development. The first, needing an enabling design that can handle the large volumes, the high viscosities, the complex formulations, the compatibility issues, and the delivery issues. Moving forward towards something that is not present today with the legacy drug delivery devices, moving forward towards an enabling design with the ArcBios. Second, self-administration and home treatment, customizing the patient interfaces for the devices to make sure that we have user error-free devices so that the therapy really works for the patients. And then finally, adaptive manufacturing methods to be able to develop both the drug and the device simultaneously according to GMP manufacturing, and provide these avenues for initial characterization, early characterization, so we can take into account all of these multiple variables and parameters and be able to really optimize the therapy for the patient. Thank you.